especially your presentation talking about the health sector and most of the projects that are happening in your country, like in the area of intervention, HIV. At most of the time when we talk about such intervention, we mention Africa. But we don't go to Africa and look at the situation of things. That I sometimes find it not, can I use the word, not acceptable. Because in my country, Nigeria, if we take it, there's a lot of intervention in HIV, preventive, a lot of work done by the NGOs. There's so much going on in Africa. But most of the time when you mention Africa, you, in quote, make it a dark place. No, Africa is not like that. So we need to go on ground. Most of the talking, we should do most of being pragmatic on the field. We should be on the field because this is South-South cooperation. We need results. If we need results, we need to be on the field. We don't need to be assuming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My question is to Mr. Balakrishnan. How has Cuba achieved such low cost and high excellence medical education? Is there any information on that? And Jessica, I must say, Guatemala is not alone in the problems that you so frankly brought on the table. There are people who impede implementation of many schemes in many countries, including India. So I thought I'll sympathize with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one in the back there. Thank you.
Myself, Dr. Malti Goel. I want to ask Dr. Balakrishnan, Mr. Balakrishnan, Ambassador. You talked about so many areas, potential areas, where we can have cooperation. But normally, whenever there is a discussion on cooperation, either we have with the not advanced countries, or there is a hesitation in sharing the information, and there are so many restrictions. So the cooperation does not really materialize when we talk of South-South countries, in some cases, especially for India and neighboring countries. I mean, others I don't say so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come back to the panel, and then I'll do a second round if that's okay. So I'm going to start off with Professor James. I think there's a question on Africa.
No, I totally agree with him. In fact, that's why there was no reference to HIV/AIDS and all these things. What I was talking was that we conceived this a Pan-Africa e-network. This was actually conceived long back, 2004, and the person instrumental was Dr. J.P. Abdul Kalam. Then discussions were held with the African Union. This African Union who proposed which hospital should it be and where should all be the primary health centers and all set up. And there it is a question of, it's not disease specific. What we are providing was that cost-effective consultation with the super specialty hospitals, both in Africa and India. And that is a morale booster for people in remote villages who are, I mean, particularly the doctors, because they always don't have the latest technology or this stuff. They can always consult these things. But the point which he made, that is the most important. That's what the stress of the whole thing. It has to be locally conceived, locally developed, and local demand-driven, these things. Not something which we sit outside and we say, oh, we have this thing, we will give it to them. That's not. What the local population want, that should be provided to them if one has the capability. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll also address the question posed by the gentleman from Nigeria. I also completely agree with what you're saying. Actually, one of the points I try to make is that if we're going to be successful in implementing, structuring long-term, highly ambitious health projects in Africa, we need to know Africa better than we do. And, you know, and part of the political discourse in my country is that we're very close to Africa, and we know Africa because of historical ties, the slave trade. Brazil is actually the country that has the largest number of blacks after Nigeria. But this is the argument only goes so far. I mean, how many centers for African studies do we have in our universities? Not many, and they're not that good. I mean, and the realities of the African countries, despite all the similarities, colonialism, imperialism, and the like, it's still very different from our own. Like I mentioned, the political support that we get from some of our projects at home, there's no counterpart in Africa, and that might be a problem if you want to implement those kinds of projects. So again, I agree. Thanks.
Yeah, question on Cuba, low-cost medical education. Actually, you can't isolate this from the overall development experience of Cuba. The background to this is that Cuba has a very high literacy rate, almost 100%. School education is completely free, university education is free. So they have a good human resource base, and they have a wide network of hospitals. The government decided to set up medical colleges in fairly large number for a small country of 10 million all across, and they leverage this capacity to train students who have a medical degree. They leverage it into their health diplomacy. They even have people coming from the US, particularly from the underprivileged sections, to study medicine. We had some Indian students from the Northeast who got into Cuban medical system, and it's free. There's no tuition fee. There are 100 Pakistani students coming in after the POK earthquake because they went there and saw that the health system was a total mess. So they offered places for 100 of them. So they came there and studied. So it's an outcome of a certain development process. It can't be isolated from the overall system and the commitment of the country to basic health and education at the highest level. I can give you, for example, Fidel Castro went to the extent of saying that even if there is only one child in an isolated village in the mountains, there should be a school. So that kind of political will and commitment was there in the health and education sector. Plus, it's a relatively small country, and social mobilization under a one-party system is not difficult. You can mobilize people. I'll give you an example of dengue. When they had dengue cases in Havana, the method used was every week spray every building, including embassies, no question of immunity, and put all the school children at work to remove all the foci where water collects, including eggshells, tires. So the school children were put into that. So this kind of social mobilization is, you can't evaluate it in terms of money. I mean, the cost in terms of money of this project was very low. So not a rich country, but in terms of human effort, it was considerable. About technology controls, in the areas I mentioned in the south, there is nothing much of strategic value. The issue of technology controls comes when there is a strategic dimension to certain technology, which comes in the aerospace and in the nuclear sector. The sectors I've mentioned are sectors where there is you might not see much of strategic dimension. Maybe nanotechnology, there are very small sensors which can be used for strategic purposes, but apart from that, none of them really. ICT, yes, I agree. But barring that, there is no real reason not to share knowledge among the South. Between the South and the North is a different story. I mean, there the decision to share the knowledge may be influenced not just by strategic reasons, but by commercial interests. So, but by now, countries of the South have a significant capacity in S&T, and I think they're now in a position where they can use it. And if you add the strength of the diaspora, which is in the advanced countries, then you have a fairly formidable critical mass. I just want to comment about what our friend from Nigeria said. I think we have a lot to learn from how Africa faced up the AIDS, HIV epidemic. I was posted in Zambia, and I remember the Zambian health system, public health system, the very severe strain under which they operated at the peak of that time. I would say their medical personnel were nothing short of heroic in the way they did it. And the government mounted an excellent public information campaign about HIV AIDS to sensitize particularly the youth about the dangers. it was so good in quality that people from many countries came to study that and to learn lessons from that. So I can only say that I wish we had also learned some lessons from that. Thank you.
I'll take another round of questions. There was a hand in the back. Yes, there.
I just wanted to ask or say that when we talk of science and technology, we generally talk of the high-end technologies or newly emerging technologies, which seem all right for the developed countries. But if we look into our own technological development, the historical development, we'll find many, many things that we have already used, but which we have discarded on the way. Simple things are like a solar cooker, for example. It's energy saving, and if the scale is very large, it can actually save substantial amount of energy as well as forests. So similarly, there are various things, say cooling by evaporation rather than air conditioning has many benefits vis-a-vis the air conditioners. Similarly, in Rome, you find very cool water coming from the streams through a series of aqueducts. So, that kind of water engineering which can put together streams that we already know are there and utilize that. Because normally when we talk of technology, we tend to talk only of high-end technologies, but this kind of knowledge, traditional knowledge or whatever you call it, is also there, is also technological in some sense, and can also be adopted on a large scale. I used a solar cooker for several years, maybe 10, 15 years, but now I cannot find it anywhere in the market. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention. Are we okay for time, Sasha, or do we have to basically cut off here now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the panelists about a minute or less to just do, if they want any wrap-ups, and then we can close the panel. You want to make any statement? Closing remarks? No? Ambassador?
Yeah, I don't think we distinguish between high and low-end technology. Technology is technology. If it's useful, we should apply it, period.
Thank you. Okay. Professor?
Yeah, the point she made is a very this thing. In fact, this is one of the reasons why we were going on talking about protecting and conserving traditional knowledge and using it. In fact, there is much which people can learn from the traditional knowledge, for particularly in the health sector, innovative this thing, practice and all that. So I agree with your observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the panelists for their very, very salient issues, and I think with that we can go to tea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was
In the front.
no. Yeah.
Back. Thank you. It was very informative. Thank you for that experience.
Yes, that's nice. Wonderful. Your seat is over there.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Good to see you again.
Yes.
I saw you in 2015 when we had a policy. Many years ago, you might not remember, we had a large group, 30 people.
Oh, with the
South,
ORF.
ITEC. Yeah, no.
No, the ITEC.
ITEC call.
Good, so you're back.
Yeah, all the confidence.
Left, yeah, that's what. Thank you. So I suggest that we would start the session now. The whole conference is running a bit late, but it's no problem. It always happens, and it's usually a sign that the discussions are going very well and people just enjoy the exchange of ideas. So I very much welcome you to this parallel session. I'm Thomas Fuß from Germany, Associate Researcher with the German Development Institute. We have a what I find very challenging session now on the issue of peace and conflict management. This is quite a sensitive area, and I'm very happy that the organizers of the conference included this, because it really gets us to the middle of some conflicts or tensions